The wind outside whispered against the cracked window panes of a small apartment on the east side of the city. Inside, the faint hum of an old refrigerator blended with the soft scratch of pencil. On paper, 6-year-old. Ethan was finishing his homework at the kitchen table. His little legs swung back and forth as if unaware of the heaviness that hung in the air. Across from him sat his mother, Sarah Collins, a woman who had mastered the art of smiling through pain. Her eyes held the kind of quiet stories that words never dared to tell. Of nights without sleep, of unpaid bills, of whispered promises to her son when the world grew too loud. At 29, Sarah had learned that survival was more than a habit. It was her second job. That evening, she folded Ethan's small school uniform, her fingers brushing over the fabric that had begun to fade from too many washes. A knock came at the door, soft but insistent. Her heart skipped a beat. She already knew who it was. "Sarah?" came a muffled voice through the wood. It was Mr. Blake, the landlord. "I'm gonna need that rent. You're already 2 weeks late." Sarah pressed her palm to her chest, steadying her breath. "I'll have it soon, Mr. Blake," she replied, trying to sound confident. There was silence, then the sound of retreating footsteps. She exhaled slowly, glancing toward Ethan, who had stopped drawing. "Mom, are we moving again?" he asked, his small voice filled with worry. Sarah forced a smile. "No, honey. We're staying right here. Now finish that drawing, okay?" Later that night, when Ethan had fallen asleep, Sarah sat by the window, the streetlights flickering outside. She opened her worn wallet. Just a few crumpled bills stared back at her. Rent, food, the bus pass for Ethan, everything she needed seemed farther away than ever. Still, she whispered to herself, "We'll be okay. Somehow we always are." The next morning, gray clouds blanketed the city. Sarah's shoes splashed through puddles as she hurried to the bus stop. Her coat soaked through. The umbrella she used to carry had broken weeks ago, but she didn't mind the rain anymore. It reminded her she was still moving, still trying. At Bennett's grocery, where she worked as a cashier, the scent of fresh bread mixed with the sharp tang of cleaning supplies. Her shift began before sunrise. She was good at her job, not because she loved it, but because she believed kindness mattered. "Good morning," she'd say to each customer with a genuine smile, even when her feet ached and her stomach growled. But Natalie Gray, her supervisor, thought differently. "Keep your line moving." "Sarah," Natalie snapped whenever she saw her talking kindly to customers. "We're here to make sales, not friends." Sarah always nodded quietly. But deep down, she believed otherwise, that sometimes kindness was the only thing people remembered. Thursday morning began like every other. Rain falling in thin silver. Lines against the store windows. Customers rushing in and out. The beeping of scanners echoing in the air. Sarah's hands moved quickly, scanning groceries, counting change, forcing herself to stay focused. Then she saw him. A man stood near the entrance, drenched from the rain. His clothes were worn. His hair plastered to his forehead, and in his hands, he clutched a paper bag that was tearing at the corners. He looked lost, not just in the store, but in life. He hesitated before walking toward her register. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice rough from the cold. "I just need a bottle of water. I lost my wallet outside. I'll come back and pay once I find it." Before Sarah could answer, Natalie's voice sliced through the noise. "Sarah, what's the holdup?" Sarah turned halfway. "He just needs—" "Let him go," Natalie snapped. "We're not running a charity." The man's shoulders dropped as he turned to leave. Something in Sarah's chest tightened. She reached into her apron pocket, feeling the few crumpled bills she had, the money she'd been saving for Ethan's bus pass. Without thinking, she pulled out $2 and placed them on the counter. "Wait," she called gently. "Take this, please." The man froze, turning back in surprise. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. Sarah smiled, her eyes warm. "I know. But maybe today, you just need someone to care." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes softened. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're the first person who's looked at me like I exist today." Sarah nodded. "Everyone deserves kindness." He smiled faintly, took the bottle, and walked out into the rain. She turned back to her register, unaware that her life had just changed forever. Moments later, Natalie appeared beside her, fury in her eyes. "Office now." Sarah's stomach dropped. She followed Natalie into the cramped manager's office, the smell of cheap coffee lingering in the air. "You gave away store money," Natalie accused. "It was mine," Sarah said softly. "Doesn't matter. Company policy forbids assisting non-paying customers. It's misconduct." Sarah blinked, stunned. "I just helped a man who was thirsty." "And you helped yourself right out of a job," Natalie snapped, signing the paper in front of her. "You're terminated, effective immediately." That evening, Sarah walked home under a dark sky. The rain came down harder now, soaking her coat, clinging to her hair. In her trembling hands, she held the letter that ended her only income. She wanted to cry, to scream, but all she could do was whisper to herself, "How do I tell Ethan?" When she reached home, the small apartment was warm with the smell of instant noodles. Ethan ran to her, holding up a piece of paper. "Mommy, look! I got a star from my teacher today." Sarah forced a smile, hugging him tightly. "And that's wonderful, baby. I'm so proud of you. Can we get pizza tomorrow?" he asked eagerly. She hesitated, her throat tightening. "Maybe next week, sweetheart." Later that night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sarah sat by the window. The city lights shimmered through her tears. She looked at the termination letter again, her reflection faint in the glass. "You did the right thing," she whispered to herself. Across town, in a towering penthouse, Alexander Reed stood quietly by his window. His assistant entered. "Sir, you were gone for hours today. Were you really undercover again?" Alexander didn't answer immediately. He held up 2 damp dollar bills. "She gave me these," he said quietly. "Her own money. For water." The assistant frowned. "And she got fired for it." Alexander's jaw tightened. "That's not the kind of company I built." He turned back to the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "Tomorrow," he said, "we fix this." The next morning, Sarah woke early despite not sleeping. She made breakfast, packed Ethan's lunch, and walked him to school. "Be good, okay?" she said, kissing his forehead. "Always," he smiled. As she returned home, a sleek black car was parked outside. A man in a dark suit stepped out, holding an envelope. "Miss Sarah Collins?" "Yes." "Mr. Alexander Reed would like to see you." Her heart skipped. "I think you have the wrong person." "I assure you, ma'am, I don't." Within an hour, she sat in the back seat as the car moved through the city. Anxiety filled her chest. When they arrived at Bennett's grocery headquarters, the same company that had fired her, she hesitated. At the top floor, the elevator doors opened to a grand office. Alexander Reed stood by the window, dressed sharply, confidence radiating from him. When he turned, Sarah gasped. You're the man from the store." He smiled gently. "And you're the woman who reminded me what kindness looks like." "I didn't know who you were," she said. "You weren't supposed to," he replied. "That's what made it genuine." He handed her a torn letter, her termination notice ripped in half. "You didn't deserve this. Natalie Gray no longer works here." Sarah's eyes widened. "I never meant to cause trouble." "You didn't," Alexander said softly. "You reminded me that somewhere along the way we forgot our humanity." He handed her a folder. "This is a new position, Director of Community Outreach. Full salary, flexible hours, and support for your son's schooling." Sarah's voice trembled. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a purpose," he said warmly. "You've been helping people your whole life. Now it's time someone helped you." Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I accept." That evening, Sarah picked up Ethan from school, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Guess what?" she said with a smile. "What?" "Mommy got a new job." His face lit up. "Really? So we can get pizza?" She laughed, tears shining in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart." "Pizza and maybe even that cake you wanted." They walked home through the golden sunset, hand in hand. Across the street, a familiar car waited. Alexander watched quietly as they disappeared down the sidewalk. "Sometimes," he whispered, "it takes losing everything to remember what truly matters." Under Sarah's leadership, Bennett's Grocery transformed. The company began sponsoring shelters, food programs, and scholarships. Employees volunteered, inspired by her story. Customers noticed the difference: real smiles, genuine care. Years later, Sarah stood on stage at a charity gala. Her son, now a teenager, beamed from the front row. She spoke softly, her voice full of emotion. Kindness isn't something you measure, she said. It's something you choose, even when it costs you. The day I thought I lost everything was the day I found my purpose. The audience rose in applause. Among them, Alexander watched quietly, pride in his eyes. That night, as Sarah and Ethan walked home under the same city lights that once witnessed her struggles, she looked at him and said, "See, baby? Sometimes life takes everything from you, only to give you more than you ever dreamed." And somewhere deep in the city's heart, where rain once washed away her tears, kindness found its way home again, proving it costs nothing, but changes everything.